Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Indy Grove. I'm thrilled to have Governor Murphy here with us today. For those of you who have not been here before, we were founded in 2013. We are the first co-working space in Jersey City, and we have grown into an incredible community of entrepreneurs and independent professionals here in Jersey City. There's really nothing like this that I've ever seen. The people here are special, and they have a lot of courage and a lot of tenacity, and they are doing what they do. And I'm very proud to show off my community day today to you. With that said, I met Governor Murphy for the first time about 3 months ago.
That's right.
I was asked and honored to give his opening remarks when he gave his economic address in October. And while we were backstage, I opened my big mouth, as I always do, and said, well, you know, when you come to Jersey City, you got to come see Indy Grove. So I've been thrilled with the initiatives that he's put forth in terms of small business support around funding, incentives for small businesses around hiring, and all of the sort of innovation and technology that he's pushing in this state. We need it, we deserve it, and we have the talent for it. So we need the support that we can get. And I thank you for that and everything that you're pushing forward. So with that said, I can say he's a man of his word. He is here today, and it's my honor to introduce Governor Murphy.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you. Big deal to be here. A big deal, a big day for us, actually, in many respects. Good morning, still morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Zara, for your great welcome, for your introduction. You said it exactly right when we met in October, backstage. You said that you got to come by and see the place with my own eyes. It took us a little bit to get it together and find a date, but
Much sooner than I anticipated.
yeah, well, we try to run like a German train, not every day, but for the most part we do. So I'm thrilled to be here. Just did a great tour. Many of your tenants are with us. So again, to them, I say hello again. A really special place. So thank you for having us. Very important day. In one respect, it's the first anniversary of my putting my hand on the Bible as governor. So yeah, thank you for that. So far, so good. And more importantly, it is the 25th anniversary of the first date that I had with my wife. And I, by the way, Mr. Romance, how do we celebrate the date? A quick dinner, but it was a quick dinner so that we could get back and watch the Kansas City Chiefs play a football game on television. Joe Montana was the quarterback, and I think it was his second to last game, his last victory. I will not be rooting for the Chiefs on Sunday, by the way. But thank you so much. What a treat to be here, and also with the entrepreneurs and the folks who are building their business here, and thrilled to be here. And this notion is a notion that sort of embodies so much of where we want to take this economy. The electricity that you feel, the excitement, the folks who are at the edge of their seat building businesses. You have an extraordinary model. And it's not just the economic model, it's what goes with the package here, which is as compelling as the economic model, which are things like, if you're a member of of Indy Grove, you get access to group meetings, you get access to educational imperatives and other programs that you put in and around it. And I think that distinguishes this place from some of the other folks who are in a similar model. So in addition to the co-working spaces in the offices and the conference rooms and the phone booths, and whether you're a monthly member or you're walking in as an hourly member, whatever it is, this is a pretty special spot, and I'm thrilled to be here. And I'm thrilled to be in Jersey City. So I got the council president, and I got a full arsenal of council men and women here. I'm honored. So to you, Mr. President, and to your colleagues, thank you for having us. Assemblyman Nicholas Chiaravolati is right in front of me. Nicholas, great to be with you, pal. With you yesterday at the State of the State. I saw you standing in the back a few times. I was taking note of how many times people got up. Your business administrator is here. I'm thrilled to be here. This is an extraordinary community, and in so many respects, it's been a rocket ship. And this organization represents or reflects that as much as anything. So thank you for having us. Thanks to the dignitaries for coming out. Thanks for your entrepreneurial tenets for being with us and hosting us so graciously. I started my State of the State address yesterday in a way that I probably wouldn't have anticipated a week or 10 days ago, with a call for a new mindset in how New Jersey partners with businesses to create jobs and a better economy. I made that call, I have to say, with people like Zara and your tenants here at Indy Grove squarely in mind. This is where we want to go. I've said this before. Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player, was asked, "What makes you so good? What makes you so different?" And he said very simply, "I go to where the puck is going, not to where it is or has been." And that embodies so much of how we're trying to build the new economy in the state. We want to go to where it's going, and a place like Indy Grove is as emblematic of that as any place I know. The state comptroller's audit, which is what triggered a different speech yesterday that I probably would have been scheduling or planning 10 days ago, their audit of our past, and this important word to note, past incentive awards gave us all that we need to know about their effectiveness. I wasn't honestly hugely surprised by their report and to read that the system was broken. In fact, I ran, and some of the members of the press here will remember this, I ran for governor knowing, or at least sensing deeply, that it was, and committing to fix it. My concern probably is more in the magnitude of the issue as opposed to whether or not it existed. And I want to be very clear, as I said yesterday, and I'll continue to say, that tax incentives should be, and in fact must be, part of a smartly conceived economic plan. But we need programs that care just as much, if not more, for the businesses being born and taking shape at places like right here at Indy Grove than the huge corporations that had gotten the majority of taxpayers' money. We need programs that care about investing in people and communities, maximizing critical investments in things like NJ Transit and other infrastructure, and not just giving out tax breaks. So at one level today, I'm proud to announce these new programs that we have been pioneering and have had discussions with our legislative colleagues, and just to give you a little bit of a sense of how they work. But in some respects, it's not new news, because the day you and I met, I actually alluded to these programs. And there are 5 of them. And they each play a very particular role in terms of rebuilding our economy. I'd say as a backdrop, putting aside failings that the audit so glaringly spoke to, one of the big failings as a policy matter was that we sort of gave up the care and feeding of the startup economy. And I associate it, this is a state, the frame for me, this was Silicon Valley before there was a Silicon Valley. This was, and there's no reason to believe it can't be again, the state of innovation. And there's lots of proof to that. Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison, as individuals, Bell Labs, Sarnoff Labs, the technology, telecommunications presence historically in this state, the huge bio, life science, health science, pharmaceutical presence. So it is not as though we are trying to become something again that we have no DNA associated with, or we have no legacy or history. We want to recapture the magic. And I think my frame, regardless of of what we think of the policy. I think we did okay, and I say okay, in holding onto the big companies, but we turned our back on the startup culture and the startup community and the startup businesses and the entrepreneurs. I associate it, I don't know that there's a direct line associated to this, but I associate it with the demise of Bell Labs. You know, this is Bell Labs in their couple of locations in the state had 8 Nobel laureates and 3 Turing Prize winners. There's no other organization in the world that can say that. And as as AT&T changed its focus and Lucent and whatnot, that presence diminished and then disappeared. And so that arc of theoretical research to applied research to commercialization, we sort of gave up on in places like Boston and Northern California, to pick 2 places in particular, latched onto that. It also, in my humble opinion, is a lesson in the need to have as deep a set of relationships between our higher education research universities and the real economy. And the great news there is there's a lot of good stuff going on. Rutgers has got an over $700 million annual research budget. Princeton is widely viewed to be among the top 2 or 3 research universities in the entire world. And just to pick those 2 examples, you could pick NJIT, Stevens, Rowan, many others. But in those 2 cases, they are demonstrably, without any question, deepening their engagement on that arc between theoretical research to applied research to commercialization. So that's the sort of, I wanted to say that because that's the sort of frame that informs how we've thought through and how we've come up with the 5 elements of this program. So the first one is something we call NJ Forward. And NJ Forward, again, this is not really news because we talked about this since October, but I want to reiterate what that is. It's our replacement for what we have currently, or has been called historically, the Grow New Jersey program. So NJ Forward will focus on creating jobs in targeted high growth and high wage industry sectors. Again, going to where the puck is going. And it'll be, in addition to that, it'll focus on creating and retaining jobs in our opportunity zones, which is the only part of the federal tax plan from a year ago, December, that's got any attraction to us. And in fact, there are opportunity zones. Let's give a shout out to Jersey City. There are some opportunity zones in Jersey City that have been rated among the most attractive opportunity zones in the United States, not just in New Jersey. We were one of the first states to submit our zones to the U.S. Treasury. We got 169 of them. These are tracts, census tracts, high poverty census tracts, spread across 75 communities, at least one in every county in the state. And essentially, it's a federal incentive to put more chum in the water to attract private investment that otherwise wouldn't come in. So again, NJ Forward focused laser-like on job growth in the high wage growth and high job creating industry sectors, and in focusing on how you stack incentives with the opportunity zones. And things beyond that. Things that I suspect would be very sympathetic to Zara and Indy Grove generally. Incentivizing smart things like hiring locally, a partnership with a research university, which I mentioned a minute ago, or transit-oriented development. Again, so we know where we want to get to. Let's make sure the programs are weapons that allow us to get there as fast as possible. I mentioned the high wage, high growth sectors. I don't have them all off the top of my head. There are, I think, 7 or 8 of them, but it includes, not surprisingly, things like life sciences, technology, advanced manufacturing and logistics, food, where there's an enormous amount of innovation happening, digital, TV, and film is one category. We put the film and TV tax credit back in. We think New Jersey can be a game changer once again in that arena, and there are a few others. Awards under NJ Forward will be capped at $200 million annually. They'll be allocated on a first-come, first-served basis, and they'll last for 5 years. And the 5-year piece has been typical in our state. We work on these incentives, and they have a 5-year life. So NJ Forward, $200 million annually, first come, first serve. It'll have a life of 5 years, and again, it's focused on high wage growth, high job creating growth sectors, and very specifically hoping to stack in with opportunity zones and then have some other important bells and whistles around that. Secondly, we'll replace the Economic and Redevelopment Growth Program, or otherwise referred to, as you may have heard, as ERG, with NJ Aspire, which is a competitive twice-yearly award program. True to its name, NJ Aspire will support community aspirations through neighborhood-based investments, spurring the conversion of vacant and underutilized properties into job-creating development opportunities, whether it be a business headquarters or an incubator or co-working space in our downtowns. It could be new housing or a cultural hub where people can come together. So again, ERG, as it's been commonly referred to, will be replaced with NJ Aspire. NJ Aspire will have clear criteria, including a requirement for workforce development and apprenticeship opportunities, and it will be capped at $100 million annually. So that's the second piece of this. We got NJ Forward, NJ Aspire. Thirdly, we're going to replace the current brownfields remediation and development grants with a competitive tax credit. This new tax credit will be capped at $20 million annually and at no more than $4 million an award. So at the very minimum, you'd have 5 of these per year and hopefully a lot more. It will aim to clean more contaminated sites and create more jobs. You know, we're the densest state in the nation. We've got a lot of environmental legacies that we're digging out from the past. Something like this is incredibly important to keep and then update and refresh as we are doing. So the third piece is brownfields. Fourthly, we're also going to create a new and competitive state historic preservation tax credit to breathe fresh life into old buildings. The Economic Development Authority will partner with the departments, both the Departments of Community Affairs and the Environmental Protection, on establishing criteria to ensure the effective redevelopment and rehabilitation of historic properties. Nicholas and I have walked the streets of Bayonne. I could see that having a huge applicability there, here in Jersey City, Rolando, right, without question. I go to work many days in Trenton, where you've got extraordinary bones and building stock, but folks need some more chum to bring the private capital in that we need to transform these places. The Historic Preservation Tax Credit will have an annual cap of 20, I almost added a zero there by mistake, $20 million, and a project cap of $4 million. So per project, $4 million, total of 20. At a minimum, you'd have 5. I hope we'll have a lot more than that. It will also provide a bonus to plans that set aside, and this is important, 20% of the project for the creation of affordable housing, which we desperately need, or which include an incubator or co-working space to grow small businesses. So you got a bonus. We're trying to throw as many bonuses in here as possible, again, to create the economy that we intend to achieve in our future. Let's have weapons at our disposal that are very tailored toward that objective. These are the incentive programs that will work in partnership with our fifth and final piece of this, which is an Evergreen Innovation Fund. The Evergreen Fund will allow us to truly ignite New Jersey's startup culture, a culture that is alive and well in places like Indy Grove here, by bringing back hundreds of millions of dollars annually into venture capital. So I think about 5 years ago, New Jersey was the 5th highest destination of venture capital money in the country. I believe last year, if my memory is correct, we were 15th. Now 15th isn't as bad as some other rankings you could have, because you could be as low as 50. But importantly, outside of the density of the top 3 to 5 locations, there's the drop-off is dramatic, to say the least. Bless you. It is Northern California. It is Boston. It is New York City, Research Triangle in North Carolina, Austin, Texas. There's a handful of winners right now. And there's a chicken and an egg piece here, right? So, and I don't need to tell the folks who are trying to build their businesses, you not only need great talent, you need a host such as yourself, you need talent, you need a great idea, and at the end of the day, you need capital to help that happen. So this Evergreen Fund, I won't get into the details, is a way to generate that capital, to staple that capital to private venture capital money, and to invest in the startup community, with the only stipulation being that it has to be in New Jersey. There's also another wrinkle to this, which brings the proximity of the big companies much more closely aligned with the startup culture. So in other words, if you're a big company and you're bidding on a tax credit, which this would envision, you get picked not just for the price you're willing to pay, but also what is your care and feeding plan to help contribute to a place like Indy Grove and others like it. What are you prepared to do? So those are the five. And again, this has been out there to a certain extent, but I wanted to make sure that we were very specific about these programs today, given that we're really excited about what they will do to help us achieve that economy that we really want to achieve. So it's NJ Forward, NJ Aspire, the Brownfields, the Historic Preservation, and the Evergreen Investment Fund. Taken as a whole, this is how we replace a broken system with one firmly rooted in the same entrepreneurial spirit that we see and feel right here and in places like right here. This is how we create a new economy that can create jobs and strengthen not just our middle class, but also entire communities. It is how we create an economy that reaches deep into our communities to create opportunities in long overlooked neighborhoods. There will be no more outsized awards that were won through connections rather than merit, and no more open-ended commitments we can't afford and which rob us of the opportunity to make critical investments in education and infrastructure. The folks here at Indy Grove are smart, they're optimistic, and they are dreaming of success. They need a New Jersey that too is smart and optimistic and which helps them achieve their dreams. And that's what we're committed to giving them. And again, when you think about the toolkit that you deploy to create that economy that we aspire to create, tax incentives are an important tool in that toolkit. There's no question about it. The questions are really only twofold. How forward-looking are they? How precise are they? How are we going to make sure we monitor them to the penny? So there's how do you design that tool in the toolkit? And the other big question is what are the tools you got in that toolkit? And I mentioned yesterday, I repeat today, the big tools in that toolkit are best educational experience in America, hopefully sooner than later, free of charge from pre-K right up through community college. Secondly, a big all-in investment in infrastructure, in particular in transit. And thirdly, a big investment in workforce development. Those, to my way of thinking, are the core tools in that toolbox. Tax incentives can then play a very strategic role as a tool alongside those core tools. So Zara, thank you again for hosting us. To each and every one of your tenants and colleagues, we thank you. I think we'll take a couple of questions here before we break. Nicholas, do you want to add anything? Rolando, you guys good? You sure? I don't want to cut anyone off.
We're happy to get to Hudson County.
I love being here, man. I love being here. You don't have to ask twice. Thank you. Anybody? We'll start with the press first if we can, please. Michael.
You said a couple of times that your administration has submitted legislation about this plan to the legislature.
Yep.
Are you concerned about the reception that it has gotten there?
No. The only, not concerned, the only footnote I'd put on it is we actually started writing the drafts of the legislation right after we unveiled the economic plan. The last time you and I were together, I think it was like October 1st or 2nd. We submitted those to our legislative, leadership before Christmas, I forget when. The only caveat to that would be we didn't have the benefit of the comptroller's audit until whenever it was last week. So we're now tweaking to make sure. We had anticipated a lot of the control and command issues that were lacking in the past. So I think our folks did a good job of anticipating that, but we want to make sure that we are completely encompassing the recommendations that they made. Please.
On another topic, on NJ Transit, the railroad had a pretty rough morning with a breakdown and other delays. The Atlantic City line isn't back yet.
Yep.
Commuters are wondering if the PTC deadline has been met, how come service hasn't noticeably?
Yeah. So let me start, Elise, with the Atlantic City line. We are committed, and we will bring that line up again. Period. Full stop. But we need to get. I think it's FRA has to approve that reinitiation. So we are awaiting that. If I could give you a date, I would. There was a lot of skepticism around the time that we shut it down for a few months that would never reopen it. That was never the case, and it will not be the case. That will be reopened, and I hope, obviously, sooner than later. I will say, I mentioned this yesterday, we're not building Rome in a day here, and I want to remind everybody of that. While as laser focused as we are on this, this is going to be one foot in front of the other as a general matter. The testing of the PTC achievement, which, by the way, I have to reiterate, was a huge achievement. We were at 12% a year ago today, and they achieved 100% compliance with the phase at December 31st, 2018, with a couple of weeks to spare. The testing associated with that has had a longer tail than I was anticipating. That is some of it. We still don't have the engineers that we need, which is why, as I mentioned yesterday again, that we're pursuing 4 classes this year. By the way, for those of you who haven't been watching this, that's unlike in some recent years where you had either one or no class of engineers. We are still beholden. I don't know the details of this morning, and we'll get back to you if I've got any more insight after Danny and I speak offline. We're still beholden to things outside of our control. And that's, the Portal Bridge, it's the Gateway Tunnel, it's largely federal stuff. But in terms of management, investment, safety systems, engineers, we are pursuing a dogged strategy, and we will get there. I just wish we could get there today, and we clearly are not there yet. Please.
Governor, in terms of the programs you're talking about here, 2 things. What kind of return on investment are you looking for? And what kind of return on investment are you looking for, and how will you define success beyond dollars and cents?
Yeah, so I don't know that we have, Brian, do we have a specific ROE, or return on ROI associated with any of these?
We will continue to use at least 110% net benefit to the state.
Yeah. So 110% net benefit is the current standard, which I think the EDA folks are inclined to continue to use. I'll be upset if it's a 10% return and not a lot more. So what are the things I'll be looking for? Controls that work, that a deal's a deal, but people do what they say they're going to do, that there's transparency, that it's capped, that taxpayers understand exactly where their money went. I don't want to speak for any of your tenants. I don't think anybody in this building is looking for a 10% return on their sweat and investment capital, right? So particularly as we build and focus on a startup culture, I hope that we have results that are meaningfully north of that. Because that's the sort of, when you're in a startup community, you're in a much different reality than you are in a standard large corporate entity. And that's not to say there still aren't going to be large corporate players that won't be part of these programs, because they will be, as long as they're in that high growth, high wage, one of those high growth and high wage sectors. But that's a quick sense for you, right?
And how will you define success?
Well, I think as I mentioned, a minute ago, you'd have success meets at least the minimum net benefit requirement. It's transparent, that there are command and control systems in place that make sure that you get back exactly what you expected. You promised to do X in exchange. I give you Y. Let's make sure that that process, that deal that we struck was in the light and it was consistent with where we're trying to take the economy. And then, in fact, you did what you said you would do, and I did what I said I would do. You know, taxpayers are going to demand, rightfully, that they understand where every penny went. And so it's our job as stewards to make sure that's the case. Please.
Are you married, this is on topic, are you married to hard caps on this? If lawmakers gave you everything you wanted but the caps, would you consider it?
Well, I'll tell you, I think right now, Ryan, I've not been asked that question before. As if I stand here today on January 16th, we're married to them. I think people need to feel like this is not an open-ended cash out the window. I mean, that's one of the big reactions we've gotten, and I think it's a rightful reaction. So I've never been asked that before. No one's raised that, by the way, yet. And they may raise it, but I feel pretty strongly we need to have limits on this. Yes?
Do you have another meeting with legislative leaders, the Speaker and Senate President, particularly on minimum wage and marijuana scheduled? I know you had to...
Yeah, I don't know that we have one scheduled, but our teams are meeting this afternoon. So we had a lot of back and forth over the past. I mentioned this in my remarks. We had a lot of good back and forth on both topics over the past number of days. I spoke very briefly, but I spoke to the Senate President at a reception we had after the speech yesterday. He and I both think we're close on minimum wage. It was specific to minimum wage. The Speaker has done great work. I give him a lot of credit. So I feel like we're close. I don't know that we have one on the books, but our teams are meeting literally today.
If I could just follow up on that, the Senate President's statement, I think it was yesterday, in reaction to the state of the state, mentioned sort of offhandedly that he needs leadership to help get the votes in the legislature for marijuana. And talking to other lawmakers, it doesn't sound like it sounds like there's a long way to go on that. So are you trying to rally support on that?
No, I can't speak to the votes. What we're still trying to do is to agree on what it looks like. And we've had, I mentioned minimum wage 30 seconds ago, but I should also say we've had some good meetings on adult use marijuana legalization over the past number of days as well. So too early to say, but you and the Senate President has said that before, and I'm conceptually fine with that, but I got to be comfortable with what I'm trying to sell, and that's what we're still trying to get to. 1, 2, please.
Hi. Question about the weather. Next few days we're expecting some storms. Just wondering how...
I'll be in some fine dining institution with the windows closed and shutters down, completely oblivious to this.
All right. What the state's going to do to prepare, and also if you have anything to say to critics or criticism that we've been over-preparing since that November.
Yeah, I got no time for the over-preparing critics. It costs a period. Those days are over. People were really frustrated with that November storm. I don't blame them. I was frustrated too. We got to do better, period, full stop. And if that means over-preparing, we're going to over-prepare. I think it costs 17 cents a mile to brine the road. So if we become the brining state of America, I will not be upset about that. I never thought I'd spent so much time on brine. But if we need to be, we're going to be more prepared. And again, it's not just a reaction to November, but people are, this is a state. Again, I mentioned a minute ago we're the densest state in the nation. We got to be able to move people around, whether it's a car, a bus, a train, or cargo, whatever it might be. And so the premium on getting that right in the state is as high as probably any state in the country, and I take that responsibility seriously. And folks were frustrated as heck in November, and I don't blame them, and I was one of them. So we got, that's mostly rant on over-preparing, and I'm happy to repeat that if you'd like. We're concerned. We had a mini storm cabinet meeting yesterday, right after the State of the State. We have a new acting chief of staff who's doing an outstanding job, Kathleen Frangione, but that core team, not surprisingly, is Colonel Callahan from the state police. It's Diane Scacchetti, who's the DOT commissioner. It's Joe Fiordaliso, the BPU commissioner. And then that group accordions out depending on how big the event is expected. So DEP would get involved, Department of Education as Homeland Security, God forbid. That is a very good and functioning, well-functioning group. We are concerned. Now, there's a more modest weather system sort of looking like it's coming through Thursday night into Friday. We're monitoring that. But we're much more concerned about the potential system coming through Saturday into Sunday. And if you look at the weather forecast, I want to make sure, by the way, if folks have any questions about this, ready.nj.gov. Ready.nj.gov is the place to go for updated information. And I won't be bashful communicating with folks if we think we're going to get walloped. One wild card, just to lay this out, that we're trying to get our arms around, it looks like, if you look at the weather from the National Weather Bureau, it looks like temperatures on Sunday literally could be something like 10 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning and 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit at dusk, which means this could be everything from 18 inches of snow to a lot of rain. So we're still trying to get our arms around that, and please bear with us. Anyone else? You had your hand up, Sarah.
Governor, Senate President seemed to indicate didn't think the law with the tax credit was necessary in the legislation. He seemed to be a bit skeptical of the AG's, I don't want to say audit of what they're doing. Any thoughts?
I only read briefly what the Senate President said, and I think we have to figure that out. I think we owe it to ourselves to figure out exactly the balance between, who shot John here, why this, when you can't prove any economic benefit from $11 billion, or you can't even find 20% of the jobs, something went wrong. And I don't know, it's too early for me to say exactly what went wrong. I do know this, as I've discussed today, what we do going forward has to look a lot different than what we did in the past. But I also, as the governor of this state, I am responsible for every penny of taxpayers' money, and we have to figure out what the heck happened. I have not, in my own mind, yet figured out that process in terms of figuring that out. I know the Attorney General took some steps on Monday, and we're also trying to figure out exactly how do we get to the bottom of this. Angela.
Quick question. The report seems to have angered some people down in Camden who believe that the incentives were part of the reason why they have a better reputation right now in the state. Any comments on that?
No, I saw a couple of those and was surprised by it. In fact, I believe it's fair to say the audit was deliberately geographically comprehensive, north, central, south. So you'll have to ask them. I don't know. I haven't had Camden in my mind as I've been thinking about this. I've got the entire system of $11 billion going out the door, trying to figure out what the heck happened to it. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Period, full stop, calling balls and strikes. Brenda.
The Attorney General said that he's going to aggressively pursue any clawbacks, basically, from some of that money that might not have been properly accounted for according to the rules and regulations. Do you have any idea what the scope of that money would be and whether or not it would matter to your budget?
I do not. So I'll have to, as I would normally, the Attorney General should address his own processes that he's put in place, but I do not, which is why part of the reason I want to go back to my answer, we're trying to figure out in my own head, how do we get our arms around that? For instance, the audit, just because it's so complicated, picked a sample size of 37 projects out of 401 over that period of time. Is that sample size reflective of the broader, of the other 300 and something? I don't know is the answer to that. It implied, based on its sample size, they couldn't find 20% of the jobs, as I mentioned a minute ago. And I believe their sample size, total job creation or retention, was 15,000, and it was 3,000 of those 15,000 they couldn't find. But beyond that, I'm trying to figure that same question out. Before I do, I will do maybe one more here, but anybody else first time? And you wanted to ask a question, but can you hold on? Ryan, and then we'll shut down.
Pete Camerano's last day was yesterday. Two questions on that. Where are you on finding a permanent replacement? I know you have an acting.
Yep.
And he was a point person on marijuana. Where does that leave those discussions, those negotiations?
Yep.
Final legislation?
Good questions, and I want to give another shout out. Pete did an extraordinary job for us, and we wish him nothing but the very best going forward. He walked out to a standing ovation from a handful of us who were still there at the final gun last night. Nicholas knows him. Many in this room know him. He's been around the scene. I've known him a long time, and he did extraordinarily good work, and we wish him nothing but the best. So we're still in process on Chief of Staff. The only thing I've said specifically, Ryan, is I have, and I'll repeat this, I've cleared the lists, and we have no overlap in our candidates with President Trump for his permanent chief of staff hiring. Want to make sure everyone's still paying attention. Secondly, we have Pete. Pete was one of the people who was riding point. You know, he's obviously the chief, so he's at the top of the rung. But we have a lot of people and senior folks as well who are intimately involved in any big policy or piece of legislation. So we've got some folks who we're not letting any grass grow. We're not letting any gaps develop. I want to thank you. I'm going to come over to you and talk to you privately. Zara, I got to thank you again. This was well worth the visit. I'm not sure it was worth the wait. I would like to have gotten here sooner. To you, to your extraordinary tenants, to the extraordinary elected officials here, to everybody, I really appreciate your hosting us so graciously. And best of luck, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, man. Good stuff. Good to see you.
Thanks, Governor. Pleasure.
See you, man. Take care of yourself.
President, thanks so much.